You think you can walk through my park like you own it? He barked, baton raised. She didn't move. She just breathed and waited. Because this time, the badge wasn't the most powerful weapon on the path. In a park cloaked in shadows, a racist cop targeted a black martial arts instructor, unaware that every step he took brought him closer to public disgrace. What began as an act of intimidation turned into a national reckoning when Maya Ellis, calm and composed, used nothing but her discipline to dismantle the very system trying to silence her. What followed was bigger than one takedown. It sparked a movement. Now, before we dive deeper, please subscribe to our channel. We share powerful, meaningful stories like this every day. And drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Thank you so much, and now let's get back to the story. Stop right there. Hands where I can see them. The voice came like a gunshot across the quiet stretch of Briarwood Commons, slicing through the night air with an edge honed not by necessity, but by dominance. Maya Ellis froze. The beam of the flashlight hit her square in the face, sharp and blinding. Her breath caught for half a second, but her feet didn't move. Not forward, not back, just rooted, anchored in training, in instinct, in the understanding that any step, any word might be twisted against her. Her fingers, which just moments earlier had casually tugged her gym bag closer to her hip, now hovered near her sides. Not raised, not lowered. Open, visible, calculated. The man behind the voice stepped forward, his black boots grinding over the loose gravel that littered the crooked park path. The halo of light from the flashlight narrowed as he approached, and she could make out his face now. Officer Darren Cole. Square-jawed, late 40s. Eyes sunken from either cynicism or something more dangerous, conviction. Not the kind that protects, the kind that punishes. I said hands where I can see them, he barked again, now within 10 feet. I heard you, Maya said softly, lifting her hands halfway up, not in surrender, but in statement. Her voice, calm, even, deliberate. That seemed to bother him. The flashlight trembled slightly in his grip. What are you doing out here? Walking home, she answered. At this hour? He challenged, circling slowly to her left. The light bobbed and twitched, and Maya resisted the primal instinct to squint or look away. I just finished teaching a self-defense class at the Northbridge Civic Center. Officer Cole didn't hide his skepticism. He tilted his head. Self-defense, he repeated, letting the word linger in the air like a bad joke. You some kind of fighter? Maya didn't flinch. Instructor. He laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. Looks like you got something in that bag. Mind opening it up? There's no probable cause for a search, she replied, still calm, still centered. Wrong answer. The baton on his hip shifted as he turned, subtle, just enough movement to signal escalation. Don't get smart with me, he snapped, stepping closer now. You want to be difficult? That's how people get hurt. That's how people get hurt. The words weren't a warning. They were a roadmap. Maya's heart beat a fraction faster, not out of fear, but preparation. The breath she drew in now wasn't to calm herself, it was to oxygenate her blood. Her body adjusted its posture almost invisibly, shifting her center of gravity, spreading weight evenly over both feet. I'm not being difficult, she said quietly. I'm asserting my rights. Cole's flashlight flicked upward, catching her eyes again. You don't want to go that route. I already have. The silence that followed was thick with unsaid threats. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed, a dog barked, and the city reminded them both it still existed beyond this narrowing confrontation. But in this sliver of darkness between the playground and the community lawn, it was just them. And the badge, and the baton. Officer Cole's lips curled. What's in the bag? Training gear. Gloves, pads, practice knives. The baton twitched in his grip. Knives? Wooden, for demonstration. He nodded slowly, as if piecing together a fiction he liked better than her truth. Why don't you go ahead and open it up? Let's take a look. She met his stare with the same neutral gaze she'd used with students who panicked during their first sparring drill. Are you detaining me, officer? Cole's face darkened. We can go that route if you want. No, I'd like to know what law I'm violating. His voice dropped low. You're violating the law of common sense. And with that, he moved. 2 quick steps, baton half raised. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't step back. Her training screamed against that impulse. Instead, she subtly dropped her weight into her knees, light on the balls of her feet. Ready. but not threatening. Cole stopped just short of her shoulder, close enough that she could smell the acrid sweat from his collar and the faint metallic tang of dried aggression. "Open the bag," he said again, slower this time. She unzipped it, never breaking eye contact. Inside, just as she said, gloves, towel, wooden trainers. No surprises, but that wasn't the point. Cole stared at the contents, then at her, then at the contents again, as if trying to force some contradiction into existence. None came. Only her silence, and the growing crack in his facade. "You think you're above this?" he growled. "I think I'm allowed to walk home without being treated like a suspect." His eyes narrowed. The baton rose an inch. That was the moment the wind changed. It slipped through the trees like a ghost, cooler now, slicing through the sticky heat that clung to the park. It rattled leaves and stirred loose trash, and with it came something unexpected. Footsteps, soft, uneven, approaching. Maya registered the sound instantly. Not Officer Cole, someone else. From the other end of the path, a figure emerged. Teenager, maybe. Slim, pale glow of a smartphone in hand, recording. Cole noticed too. He didn't lower the baton. Not yet. But his eyes flicked sideways, one heartbeat of distraction. That was all Maya needed. She didn't move, didn't blink. But the power shifted, and he knew it. "You're lucky," Cole muttered, stepping back half a pace. "No," Maya said, her voice ice steady. "I'm prepared." He stared at her for another long second, then turned sharply on his heel and started walking back toward his cruiser parked just beyond the tree line. She didn't watch him go. She kept her hands visible, her breathing steady. Only when the sound of his boots faded entirely did she finally exhale fully. The teen with the phone lowered it slightly, still watching her. "You okay?" Maya nodded once. "Yeah." The flashlight was gone, but the weight of the night remained. She should have been home by now. Instead, she stood beneath a flickering park lamp, not shaking, not crying, but forged, hardened, sharper than she was hours ago. Her gym bag still sat on the path. She picked it up and started walking again, her posture tall, her eyes forward. She didn't look back. "I don't think you understand the situation." Officer Darren Cole's voice dropped lower as he stepped into Maya Ellis's space again, this time slower, more deliberate. His breath, sharp with suppressed fury, hung in the cold air between them. The street lamp above cast warped shadows on the cracked pavement, making their silhouettes dance like echoes of a storm not yet past. Maya didn't respond. She stood calm, poised, with her gym bag now resting at her feet, contents partially revealed. "I've answered your questions," she said after a pause, her voice measured. "There's nothing suspicious about what I'm carrying. You know that." Cole ignored the logic, his hand brushing once more against the handle of his baton. It was the third time in as many minutes. "See, I think there's something you're not telling me," he said, circling her like a predator testing the edge of a cage. "You're too calm, too rehearsed." "No," Maya corrected softly. "I'm disciplined. There's a difference." He stopped, cocked his head as if her words had struck something raw. Then, with the kind of smile that didn't touch his eyes, he said, "We'll see how disciplined you stay when things get real." A flick of his wrist. The baton unhooked from his belt. The steel rod hung loosely from his right hand, down, but not at rest. Maya's muscles tensed reflexively. Every cell in her body knew this dance. The tension before a punch, the inhale before a kick, the shift in weight before someone does something they can't undo. "You're escalating," Maya said, loud enough for the teenagers still filming from a distance to hear. "There's no probable cause, no threat. You're not here to protect, you're here to provoke." "Watch your tone." His voice came tight, too tight. "Why? Will that be your excuse if you use that weapon on me?" Cole's nostrils flared. The baton twitched in his grip. Maya didn't move, didn't blink. Every inch of her restraint was a mirror, and in it, he saw the distortion of his own rage. "Take everything out of the bag," he ordered sharply. "You've already seen the contents." "I said everything." Behind them, the park buzzed faintly with insects and the distant thrum of passing cars. But in this patch of silence, it was just her, the flashlight beam, and the weight of implied violence. Maya slowly crouched down, deliberate, controlled. She reached into the bag and pulled out the items one by one. Worn training gloves, a sweat-stained towel, 2 dulled wooden practice knives. She laid them carefully at her feet in plain sight. "Anything else?" Cole asked, his voice practically vibrating with the need to assert himself. Maya met his eyes. No. You sure? You can look again, but it won't change the fact that I haven't done anything wrong. He stepped forward, too close. Close enough that Maya could see the subtle tremor in his jaw. His flashlight tilted off-center, casting jagged light across the grass. The baton hung between them like a question neither of them wanted to answer. You hiding something? He asked, more softly now, his tone oily, calculated. Because if you're clean, there's no reason not to cooperate, right? Maya didn't blink. I've cooperated, she said. You just don't like that I haven't submitted. Cole exhaled harshly through his nose, like a man stoking a fire that had already burned through every rational thought. From behind, a second phone light flickered on. Another bystander had arrived. A jogger, maybe. Maya didn't turn to look, but she felt the shift, the subtle realignment of power. Cole did too. His baton dropped a fraction, hesitating between action and restraint. That moment, that slim crack of uncertainty, gave Maya a thread of breath. Still, she knew better than to relax. She kept her feet planted, knees soft, weight balanced. Her mind ticked through exit routes. She was trained to find them, not just for herself, but for her students. But there was no escape here, only confrontation. Cole's eyes darted toward the cameras for half a second, then back to her. You want to play smart? He muttered. You'll regret it. Maya didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than defiance. It filled the space between them, daring him to justify his presence, his actions, his badge. He couldn't, not without reaching for violence. And he knew it. The baton hung heavier in his hand now, not with power, but with consequence. Then came the worst thing yet. A sound behind the trees. A voice. Everything okay here? Another flashlight beam cut through the dark, a steadier one. White. Professional. Unshaking. Officer Cole froze. Maya didn't even turn. She didn't need to. The jogger's phone was now fully raised. A red recording dot blinked steadily. Cole looked like a cornered animal. Breathing hard, fists clenched. The baton half raised as if he couldn't remember why he had drawn it in the first place. A few more footsteps approached. More witnesses. Maya still hadn't moved. Still hadn't retaliated. Still hadn't given him a single excuse to write her off as a threat. And that's what was killing him. That's what was unraveling him in front of everyone. You don't get to decide when this is over, Cole hissed. No, Maya said, her voice even. But you do get to decide how much worse it gets for you. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. And the world was watching now. She could see it in his posture, in the way his arm slowly dropped, and the baton's tip hovered just above the ground. The power had shifted. Not because she had fought him, because she hadn't. Because she had shown what real control looks like. She didn't need to win with force. She was already winning with truth. You think you can stand there and disrespect me? Officer Darren Cole's voice cracked like dry branches snapping under a heavy boot. It was no longer performance, it was something else now. Something unraveling. Maya Ellis didn't flinch. She stood motionless, hands visible, her body radiating the calm of someone who knew chaos intimately, but refused to become it. Around them, the park felt different, not just darker, heavier. More people had arrived. Joggers who had slowed, curious passersby, a teenage boy standing just beyond the iron fence, camera aimed, red light blinking. Another jogger, tall, black hoodie, reflective band across the chest, stood with a phone in hand, arms crossed, silently watching. Cole saw them too, and he hated them for it. Hated the way they bore witness, hated the way their silence condemned him louder than words. Hated the way Maya didn't give him the show he wanted. Pick up the damn bag, he barked, his tone brittle, splintering at the edges. All of it, everything. She didn't move. You said you wanted it all emptied, she replied evenly. Now it's empty. You don't get to decide when we're done, he shouted, stepping forward. His shadow broke over hers as he came close, too close. The baton still dangled from his right hand. His left hovered near his belt, a taser holstered, a pair of cuffs. Tools of law turned now into instruments of ego. Maya glanced at the equipment, but only briefly. Her eyes returned to his face, not with challenge but clarity. You're not in control anymore, she said softly, and it's eating you alive. That's when he lost it. With a guttural noise, Officer Cole lunged. No warning, no protocol, just rage. The baton arced through the air in a wild, untrained swing, meant not to restrain, but to punish. A blow fueled by humiliation, not threat. By entitlement, not danger. But Maya was no stranger to moments like this. She saw it in his hips, in the twitch of his shoulder, before his arm even moved. She taught her students for years, violence has a rhythm, and the trained eye hears it before the first beat. She pivoted, not back, but inward. Her left foot slid forward, her body twisted just enough to let the baton miss its mark. It whistled past her shoulder, slicing only air. Before his momentum could carry him past, Maya's right hand lifted. Open palm, no force, just a firm redirection against his wrist. His grip faltered. The baton slipped from his fingers, spinning once before it hit the ground with a sharp metallic clack. He stumbled, confused, and suddenly weaponless. Maya stepped back, not to retreat, to disengage. She held up both hands, palms open, her posture non-threatening but ready. Her chest rose and fell with controlled breath, centered, present. Cole's eyes were wild. "Don't you move," he growled, voice cracking under the weight of his collapsing authority. "I haven't," Maya said. "You're the only one swinging weapons. You think you're smarter than me?" "No," she said, "just more in control." He reached for his taser. The yellow grip flashed as he yanked it free. Another bystander gasped audibly. Maya's body stayed loose, but every muscle tensed beneath the surface. She saw the way he lined up the shot, the way his hands shook, not from fear but from frustration, from the need to reclaim control by any means necessary. He fired. Twin wires snapped out toward her chest, but Maya had already shifted, one breath ahead, one beat faster. She twisted sideways, letting the probes fly past her. One tangled in a nearby bush, the other clattered uselessly against the pavement. The wires drooped, limp and harmless. The crowd exhaled as one. Cole's eyes widened, his fingers clenched around the taser's grip. He fired again. Click. Spent. Maya's breathing stayed steady. She didn't speak, didn't gloat, just waited. The moment stretched and stretched. Cole stood there panting, useless weapon dangling from his hand, looking not like a protector, but a man unmade by his own undoing. Then came the sound he feared most, footsteps, approaching, rhythmic. A new flashlight beam pierced the night, stronger, brighter, controlled. A man's voice rang out, firm and clear. "Officer Cole, step back." Cole froze. Maya didn't turn. She already knew that voice. "Lieutenant Jordan Banks." The beam cut through the park like a blade of truth. The joggers fell silent. Phones rose higher, but the red lights on the screens blinked steadily, capturing every second. Cole's taser hand dropped a few inches. Lieutenant Banks stepped into full view, his uniform neat, boots spotless, badge gleaming under the light. He was a man who did not raise his voice to be heard. He didn't have to. "Drop the taser," Banks said, calm, unshakable. Cole hesitated. "Now." The taser hit the ground. Lieutenant Banks walked directly to Maya, eyes scanning her quickly, checking for injuries, for stress, for any sign that she needed support. But she stood tall, her shoulders square, her presence undeniable. "Maya Ellis?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "You're safe now." Behind him, Officer Cole took a single step back, the realization of what he'd done beginning to calcify into dread. Banks turned. "Officer Cole, you're relieved of duty, effective immediately." The crowd stirred. "You will wait by the patrol car until I finish taking Miss Ellis's statement. Hand over your badge and your service weapon." "No, you can't," Cole began, stumbling on his own breath. "I just did." Banks didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Power doesn't yell, it commands. Cole looked around, at the cameras, at the judgment, at the baton lying on the grass, and slowly, mechanically, he began to comply. Maya said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Because in this quiet corner of Briarwood Commons, under flickering lamplight and watchful eyes, the truth had already spoken. "You want to see how bad it can get?" The words were pure venom, low, cracked and vibrating with a desperation that could only come from someone who had lost control but refused to let it go. Officer Darren Cole's fingers curled tighter around the taser in his palm, wires trailing like limp accusations. His breath came hard, shallow. The last shred of logic behind his eyes flickered and died. Maya Ellis didn't blink. She'd already calculated every possibility. The angle of his feet, the twitch in his jaw, the second it would take him to reload another cartridge, or try to draw something worse. Her body was tuned like a violin string, humming with readiness, but still calm. She knew the difference between a fight and a trap, and this was a trap. "Don't move," Cole spat again, as if his bark could undo the cameras, the witnesses, the baton on the ground, his failed authority scattered like trash around his boots. "I'm not moving." Maya answered evenly, "You are." Behind her, the kid with the phone adjusted his grip, zooming in. Maya could see it reflected in the wide glass of the park light. Tiny red dot, still recording, still capturing, still telling the truth. Cole's taser hand twitched. Maya's breath slowed. Then, he fired. The sharp pop of the discharge cracked through the air. Twin wires zipped forward, metal barbs aimed straight for her torso. But Maya was already gone. Before the taser had finished its snap, she twisted, low and tight, pivoting her hips and tucking her shoulder just enough to let the projectiles fly past. One wire clipped a tree trunk. The other slammed harmlessly into the dirt. Thud. Missed. Failure. Cole stared, confused, furious. She didn't give him time to process. Maya stepped back into neutral stance, hands open, body angled, just as she had for hundreds of demonstrations. But this was no demonstration. This was real. And yet, she never struck, never advanced. She let his aggression implode on itself. The silence after the miss was deafening. It wrapped around them like a shroud. Cole's chest heaved, his hands trembled, and his taser, the weapon he'd counted on, hung from useless wires like a puppet with cut strings. More footsteps approached. From the path behind the playground, a jogger in a blue hoodie arrived, eyes wide, phone already raised. Cole looked around, slowly realizing he wasn't just losing power, he'd already lost it. "Drop it," a voice said from behind the hedge. It wasn't Maya, it was the reflective band jogger from earlier, closer now, camera steady. "You're on tape, man, she didn't touch you." Cole turned halfway toward the voice. The taser wavered in his grip. He looked back at Maya, searching for anything. Compliance, fear, permission to keep pretending he had a right to this moment. But she just stood there, strong, unmoving. That's when he made the worst mistake of the night. He charged. No weapon now, just hands, just fists. Just the raw, ugly drive to dominate something that had refused to be broken. He lunged with both arms, aiming to tackle her, crush her center, bury her calm beneath a panic of force. But Maya didn't panic. She pivoted smoothly, sidestepping his weight with the grace of someone who knew how to make gravity her ally. Her left arm reached out, not to strike, but to redirect. One hand against his upper shoulder, the other lightly guiding his wrist. Cole flew past her, off balance, out of breath. He crashed to the grass on his knees, stunned by his own failure. There was no fight, just collapse. Maya turned, hands still visible, still offering no threat. But the threat had already passed. And now the watchers were moving closer. Two more joggers appeared, one whispering to the other. She didn't even touch him. She's not resisting. He is. Phones pointed like mirrors, reflecting what he was, not what his badge claimed him to be. Cole staggered upright, dirt streaking his uniform. His hat had fallen off. His taser lay coiled in the grass like a discarded snake. And his rage, now cold and brittle, couldn't carry him any further. "Enough," came a voice from the north side of the park. Another flashlight, another badge. But this one carried weight. Lieutenant Marcus Hill emerged from the trees, his uniform crisp, his posture unshakable. He scanned the scene in an instant, the crowd, the taser, the baton still lying on the path, and Maya, perfectly still, completely unarmed. His voice was quiet but final. "Officer Cole, stand down, now." Cole froze. Then, realizing too late there was no path forward, he lowered his fists and stumbled back. Hill didn't look at him again. He walked straight to Maya. "You okay?" he asked gently, quietly. Maya nodded once. Hill turned to the crowd. "We're gonna sort this out. Thank you for staying. Thank you for recording." He looked at the blinking phones, then at Cole. Then he gave the order no one expected to hear so soon. "Reynolds, badge, gun, now." Cole's eyes widened. You can't." "I am." A beat passed, then the baton, the taser, the uniform, they became nothing. Just props on a man who no longer had a stage. Maya watched him fumble, watched his hands tremble as he handed over the symbol of power that had just failed him in front of the world. She didn't gloat, she didn't smile. She just breathed. In, out, survived. And for the first time that night, the weight on her chest began to ease. Not because someone in power had spoken, but because someone had finally listened. "We got it all on video." The words rang out like a gavel through the cold night air, clear, irrefutable, final. A young woman in a gray hoodie stepped forward from the edge of the crowd, her phone held steady in both hands. Red light still blinking. Her voice, though quiet, sliced cleanly through the thick silence that had settled around the fallen officer and the woman he had tried and failed to break. "She didn't lay a hand on you," the woman added. "You came at her." Murmurs rippled through the assembled group. More phones lifted. More witnesses stepped into the light. "I saw everything," said another bystander, a tall man with a reflective band strapped diagonally across his chest. "She kept her hands visible the whole time. He's the one who drew his baton, then the taser." "She was just walking home," someone else called from behind a tree. "You picked the wrong one, officer." Officer Darren Cole stood frozen. His face was pale now, flushed only by the raw heat of shame burning behind his clenched jaw. His baton lay in the grass like a discarded secret, his taser's wires tangled around his boots like guilt. And his badge was gone. In the hands of Lieutenant Marcus Hill, whose expression remained unreadable, carved from granite and resolve. Lieutenant Hill turned to Maya. "Ma'am," he said with a quiet authority that filled the space without force, "we'll take it from here. But I want to hear your full statement, when you're ready." Maya nodded, her breathing steady. Her hands remained by her sides, open, visible, just as they had been throughout the entire ordeal. She glanced once toward the teenager who'd recorded from the very beginning. He gave her a small, solemn nod. Validation. Witness. Truth. The crowd began to press in, not aggressively, but with the weight of collective concern. "Is she okay?" the woman asked. "She should be the one wearing the badge," someone else muttered. "She didn't even fight back," said a jogger, shaking his head in disbelief. "She could have, and she didn't. She handled herself better than he ever did." Maya's throat tightened, not from fear but from something harder to name. It was vindication, but also vulnerability, the kind that comes when survival meets spotlight. Lieutenant Hill raised a hand, calming the murmuring. "Please," he said, "anyone who recorded what happened, we'll need those videos for the investigation. You've all done the right thing by staying. Thank you." Phones tilted in acknowledgement. A few people stepped forward, offering to a waiting officer their names, numbers, footage. But Maya noticed what else was happening. Strangers were now turning to her, not just as a victim, but as a symbol. A woman who had stayed calm when others would have panicked. A woman who had chosen discipline over destruction. A woman who had shown the system what justice was supposed to look like. "Thank you," one whispered, "for holding your ground." A few feet away, Officer Cole stood stiffly near the patrol car, arms crossed, jaw clenched. But he no longer resembled a man of authority. The swagger had evaporated. In its place was a man unraveling in silence, stripped bare by the very truth he had tried to suppress. The badge was no longer on his chest, and no one was defending him. Not even his fellow officers. Because everyone had seen. Back at the center of the scene, Maya slowly crouched down and picked up her gym bag, the same one Cole had treated like contraband. Her sparring gloves, towel, and practice knives were still on the ground, quiet reminders of the absurdity of the whole encounter. She packed them carefully, methodically. No rush, no fear, only grace. When she stood again, Lieutenant Hill was still there. "We're going to give you a ride home," he said. "I can walk," Maya replied, softly but firmly. Hill didn't press. He simply offered. "You shouldn't have to tonight." Maya looked around, at the crowd, at the quiet park that had nearly become a crime scene, at the officer who had tried to erase her dignity and failed. She nodded. "Okay." As she walked toward the patrol car, now driven by a younger officer with wide, nervous eyes, a soft applause broke out from the crowd. Not raucous, not performative. Just human, real. A thank you, unspoken from witnesses who had seen not just injustice, but how to face it. Not with violence, not with surrender, but with strength. The kind that doesn't swing fists. The kind that refuses to break. Inside the car, Maya leaned back against the seat. The doors closed gently, the city outside blurred under mist and streetlights. She didn't speak, she didn't cry. She simply watched the world pass, her breath slow and steady, because she had survived the kind of moment that leaves marks, unseen but permanent. And she had done it with her dignity untouched, her strength intact, and a dozen cameras proving what too many never get the chance to prove, that she had done everything right. And the world would now have to answer for what went wrong. "Tell me exactly what happened." Lieutenant Marcus Hill's voice was low, but every syllable landed with the weight of command. He stood in the cool silence of Ashton Park, facing the woman who had just endured and dismantled one of the most volatile confrontations he'd seen in 20 years on the force. Maya Ellis didn't hesitate. Her hands still visible, her breath measured, she told the story. Not with fire, not with fear, but with facts. Step by step. She spoke of the patrol car with the flickering lights, the sudden flashlight in her face, the baton, the taser, the way she had been commanded, provoked, and nearly attacked, all without justification. Hill never interrupted, he just listened, and as she spoke, the weight of it settled into his bones, because every word confirmed what he already knew in his gut. Officer Darren Cole had crossed a line, not in the heat of a sudden moment, not under the pressure of uncertainty, but with intent, cold, escalating intent. And Maya Ellis had survived it, not by being lucky, by being better trained, better prepared. More composed than the very officer who was supposed to protect her. When she finished, Maya stepped back, giving him space. But her presence never shrank. She stood firm, even as the crowd began to thin, even as the night air turned colder around them. Hill turned toward Cole, who lingered awkwardly beside the patrol car, stripped of his badge, his belt, and any illusion that he still held authority here. His uniform looked heavier now, like a costume that no longer fit. The watching officers had kept their distance out of respect, but their silence was thick with understanding. They'd seen it too. They'd heard enough. Now it was Hill's move. He stepped forward. "Officer Cole," Hill said, loud enough for the others to hear, but not a shout. Cole stiffened. "Do you have anything to add to Ms. Ellis's statement?" Cole's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "She was acting suspicious," he said weakly. "Didn't follow orders. She resisted." "Resisted what?" Hill asked. Cole swallowed hard. "She didn't answer fast enough. She moved funny." "You mean," Hill said, his voice tightening, "she didn't cower." Cole's jaw twitched. "She had practice knives in her bag." "Which she showed you, voluntarily." Hill took a step closer. "You escalated a lawful walk through a public park into a full-scale confrontation. You drew a baton without provocation. You fired a taser at an unarmed citizen, and you did it while knowing people were recording." "She was provoking me." Cole snapped suddenly, his voice rising. "That calm thing she was doing? That's worse than yelling. She was challenging me." "No," Hill cut in, his voice a quiet thunder. "She was composed. Something you clearly haven't been trained to handle." The crowd stilled again. The words hit harder than a slap. Hill let the silence breathe for a moment before continuing. "You've had 3 prior complaints for excessive force, Darren, and I've let too many of them slide because I believed in giving good cops room to grow." He took one more step forward until they were eye to eye. "But you're not a good cop. Not tonight." Cole tried to hold his gaze, but couldn't. His eyes dropped to the ground. Hill turned away and made the call. "Officer Darren Cole, you are relieved of duty pending internal affairs investigation. I am confiscating your badge, service weapon, and recommending immediate suspension without pay. You can't do this." "I already have," Hill said, steel now fully in his voice. He turned to the other officers nearby. "Escort him to his vehicle. He's done." 2 young officers stepped in, not with malice, not with glee, but with purpose. Because in that moment, they weren't just following orders. They were drawing a line. Hill returned to Maya. "You don't need to stay," he said. "We'll follow up. Internal affairs will want a full statement, but for now, you've done more than enough." "I'll give them everything they need," Maya said quietly. "Just make sure this doesn't get buried." Hill's jaw tightened. "It won't. Not this time." A beat passed between them, an understanding. Then Maya turned and walked toward the patrol car waiting to take her home. She didn't look back, because there was nothing left behind her worth holding on to. Only what lay ahead. As she disappeared down the path, Hill stood alone beneath the buzzing street lamp, the baton still lying in the grass like a rusted symbol of failure. He didn't move for a long time, because tonight, justice hadn't come from a courtroom. It had come from a woman who refused to be broken, and now it was up to him to make sure the system she challenged didn't stay broken either. This can't be ignored anymore. Detective Laura Mitchell stood in the pale light of her office, arms crossed as she watched the grainy cell phone footage looping on her monitor. It had gone viral in less than 12 hours, millions of views, dozens of angles, hashtags trending across every platform. and not a single frame of it painted Officer Darren Cole in anything but disgrace. The footage started with a flashlight blinding Maya Ellis in Ashton Park. A calm woman, open hands, steady voice, then came the baton, then the taser, then the tackle attempts. And finally, her flawless takedown, done with no aggression, just pure discipline. The internet wasn't confused. She didn't lay a finger on him until she had to. He attacked her. And she still showed more restraint than most trained officers. Who is this woman, and why isn't she teaching every academy in the country? Mitchell clicked pause. The image froze on Maya standing with her hands open as Cole stumbled across the grass behind her. In the bottom corner of the screen, a caption flickered in white. "This is what strength really looks like." By mid-morning, local news outlets had picked it up. By noon, national coverage flooded in. Cable networks ran the clip on repeat, each segment louder than the last. Officer escalates without cause. Martial arts instructor diffuses dangerous encounter with no force. Citizen outclasses cop in public. Internet reacts. Internal Affairs hadn't even completed the intake report, and already Cole's name was being spoken in the same breath as the worst uniformed scandals of the decade. Mitchell had been in law enforcement long enough to know the patterns. Usually stories like this fizzled, buried in paperwork, muffled by media fatigue. But this one had teeth. Because this time, there was video. Because this time, there was Maya. She picked up her phone. The call went straight to Sergeant Marcus Hill. "Marcus," she said as soon as he answered. "We have a firestorm." "I know. I've never seen this kind of response so fast. People aren't just mad, they're invested. I saw it in their faces last night." She paused. "I read your report. It was solid, professional. I wrote it exactly as it happened." Mitchell exhaled. "This is going to be bigger than you or me. I already have reporters calling my office. IA is going to have to move fast. You think Maya will cooperate with a formal investigation?" "She already said she would." "Good, because I've got the chief breathing down my neck and 3 council members asking what's being done." "Tell them," Hill said. "We're not protecting anyone this time." That afternoon, Maya Ellis sat in her small apartment, blinds drawn, laptop glowing. She wasn't used to being a headline. She wasn't used to people calling her a hero. But there it was. Video after video, tweets, clips, think pieces. Black woman shows the world how to confront injustice without violence. Calm, composed, powerful. Meet Maya Ellis, the woman who turned a cop's badge into dust. She had only done what she was trained to do, what she'd taught 100 students to do: de-escalate, defend, survive. But now the world had seen what that looked like in real time, and they weren't just watching, they were reacting. Her inbox overflowed. TV producers, podcast hosts, civil rights attorneys, martial arts schools offering her speaking platforms. A message from a congresswoman's staff asking if she'd testify at a hearing. She hadn't asked for any of it, but none of it felt wrong. Because for once, the spotlight wasn't on tragedy. It was on resilience. That evening, as the city buzzed with fallout, Lieutenant Hill called Maya personally. "I wanted you to hear it from me," he said. "Cole's been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Full suspension, no badge, no gun." Maya didn't speak. "We've secured every video," Hill continued. "Internal Affairs is fast-tracking it. They want a formal interview this week." "I'll be there," Maya said simply. "There's something else," Hill added. "The chief's office wants to issue a statement publicly, but they also want to talk about the bigger issue: training, de-escalation, civilian engagement." "And they want a photo op?" Maya asked, voice even. "No," Hill replied. "They want to learn, and they want you to teach." Maya blinked. "You're asking me to train the people who nearly got me hurt?" "I'm asking you to help change them, before it happens to someone who can't walk away." She didn't answer right away. Because it wasn't a small thing what he was asking. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even justice. It was rebuilding. From inside the system that had once pointed a taser at her chest. But maybe that's exactly why she had to say yes. By the time Maya ended the call, her inbox had doubled again. One email sat pinned at the top. Subject line: "We stand with Maya." From the National Coalition for Police Reform. Attached, a petition. 47,000 signatures, calling for Officer Cole's termination, but more importantly, calling for Maya Ellis to be named a civilian advisor on defensive tactics and de-escalation. A second message followed. Subject line, "This is bigger than one officer." From the city's Civil Oversight Board, Miss Ellis, we respectfully request your voice and presence at our next hearing. Your experience may be the key to rewriting future policy. Maya stared at the screen, her pulse steady, her jaw set, and her decision clear. The video had gone viral, but she was about to go much further, not as a headline, not as a victim, but as a voice. This time, it's not going away. Detective Laura Mitchell leaned back in her chair inside the Internal Affairs Division, her office thick with case files, glowing monitors, and the stale weight of suppressed truth. But this case, Maya Ellis versus Officer Darren Cole, was different. It wasn't just an investigation. It was a reckoning, the kind that rattles more than just one officer's badge. Mitchell opened the folder again. Inside, Maya Ellis's written statement, Sergeant Marcus Hill's incident report, 8 independent video recordings, each with time-stamped footage. Cole's personnel file, a trail of warnings, disciplinary notations, and citizen complaints buried beneath vague notations like aggressive under stress. She had seen it all before, but this time it was airtight. No room for doubt, no procedural loophole, no he said, she said. The videos showed everything: Cole's posture, the flashlight, the baton raised without cause, the taser deployed recklessly, and the clean, disciplined way Maya had defended herself without ever escalating. Clear pattern of conduct unbecoming, she whispered as she typed. Use of force unsupported by evidence. Failure to follow de-escalation protocol. Immediate risk to public trust. She hit save, then stood. It was time for the confrontation that mattered most, facing Officer Darren Cole under oath. Downstairs, the interview room was sterile and windowless, a single camera mounted in the corner blinking red. Cole sat at the table, shoulders tense, his badge and weapon already stripped. His lawyer, a wiry man in a charcoal suit, sat beside him, tapping his pen in staccato bursts. Mitchell entered, no folder in hand. She didn't need one. "Officer Cole," she said without sitting. "Before we begin, you're aware this is a formal internal review under oath. Any falsehoods could result in perjury or termination. Do you understand?" Cole nodded once, jaw tight. Mitchell pressed play on the monitor. Maya's calm voice filled the room. The sound of footsteps on wet grass, then Cole's shouted commands, the baton, the taser, the charge, and finally, the takedown. The whole room seemed to shrink. When the video ended, Mitchell looked directly at him. "Would you care to revise your initial statement?" Cole's eyes twitched. She was provoking me. By standing still? She was condescending. That calm thing, she wanted to make me look bad. "You drew a weapon on an unarmed woman walking home with a gym bag. Did she threaten you?" Silence. "Did she reach for a weapon?" "No." "Did she ever touch you first?" "No." Mitchell paused, let the weight of his answers thicken. "Then why did you attack her, Officer Cole?" He didn't answer. The camera captured his silence in perfect HD. By evening, her full recommendation was filed. Termination of Officer Cole, revocation of certification, referral to Civil Review Board, mandatory psychological evaluation, formal apology requested by the city, and a final note: recommend consulting Maya Ellis for defensive training curriculum overhaul. Across town, Maya sat at the long table of the Civilian Oversight Board, flanked by community leaders, local activists, and a surprising number of officers in plain clothes. Her voice didn't shake. "Strength isn't violence," she told them. "It's control. It's discipline." And the moment that man put his hand on a weapon without cause, he proved he didn't have either. The room was dead silent. She continued. "If I hadn't trained for 10 years, if I hadn't understood how to stay calm under pressure, what would have happened? You'd be reviewing my autopsy, not a viral video." Some nodded. Others lowered their eyes. Maya leaned forward. What happened in Ashton Park wasn't just one cop making a bad call. It was the result of a system that excuses force over restraint, that teaches officers to dominate, not to understand, that praises aggression and ignores fear. She sat back, and then delivered the line that would lead every news segment that night. "If I can teach women how to protect themselves without violence, why can't you teach your officers to do the same?" By the next morning, Mayor Elaine Porter had called an emergency press conference. Flanked by the police chief and members of the Civilian Review Board, she stepped up to the podium and faced the cameras. "In light of the events surrounding Officer Darren Cole," she began, "and the heroic restraint demonstrated by Ms. Maya Ellis, we are announcing an immediate overhaul of our police training programs. Reporters leaned forward. Effective immediately, the City of Ashton will partner with civilian educators, including Ms. Ellis, to retrain our officers in de-escalation, communication, and bias awareness. What happened in that park is not just a local matter. It's a national conversation, and we're listening. Back in the crowd, Maya watched quietly. She didn't smile. Not yet, because she knew what the road ahead looked like. Policies were easy. Change was hard. But for the first time, the door wasn't just open. They had asked her to walk through it. And she would. Not just for herself, but for every woman who had walked through a dark park with fear in her chest. For every person who had been told their calmness was defiance. For every name that didn't make it home and never got to tell their side of the story. If you're ready, we are too. Those were the words Sergeant Marcus Hill spoke as he stepped into Maya Ellis's dojo 2 days after the mayor's press conference. It wasn't crowded. No media, no lights, just Hill in his crisp uniform and Maya in her practice gear, sweat darkening the edge of her collar after finishing a class for women aged 15 to 60, women who now looked at her not only as a teacher but as living proof. Hill glanced around the gym. Focus pads, floor mats. Mirrors cracked at the corners from years of wear. It wasn't flashy, but it was powerful, because this was where the real discipline happened, where Maya had built herself, day by day, drill by drill, not for revenge, but for readiness. You could have walked away, Hill said, and no one would have blamed you. Maya offered a faint smile. I still might, depending on what you're about to ask. He nodded, serious now. The department voted this morning, not just the chief, the officers. We're creating a civilian-led training initiative, and they want you to run it. Maya blinked. Wait, you mean? We're not just asking you to consult, Maya, Hill said. We're asking you to lead. She didn't respond right away, because the offer came with weight, real weight. It wasn't a photo op. It wasn't a badge of honor. It was a chance to change what got built inside the walls, to fix it before another officer reached for a baton out of fear or pride. She turned to look at the women still lingering in the locker room behind her. One of them, Marisol, a domestic abuse survivor, stood watching quietly from the hallway, eyes wide. They'll fight it, Maya said softly. They already are, Hill replied. Some unions, a few old guard commanders, but you've got momentum. Public's on your side, and truth be told, we need you more than you need us. That night, she walked Ashton Park again. Not out of habit, out of choice. The shadows still clung to the edges of the trail. The bench where she first froze under the flashlight's beam still stood crooked beneath a flickering lamp. But Maya didn't flinch. She sat down and watched. Across the street, joggers passed, cars hummed, life moved. But something had changed in the marrow of the city, because the world had seen what happened here, and no one could look away anymore. She accepted the role the next day. And when the news broke, it was more than a headline. Viral hero to system changer, Maya Ellis to lead police de-escalation initiative. In her first official training session with the department, Maya stood in front of 40 officers, half of them younger than her, all of them silent. They weren't hostile. They were uncertain. She could feel it, their arms crossed, their brows furrowed. So she began the only way she knew how. Raise your hand if you've ever been afraid on this job. A few did. She waited. Then slowly, more followed, even the ones who hadn't meant to. Now raise your hand if you've ever made a choice out of fear that you later regretted. This time the hesitation was longer, but hands rose again. She nodded. That's what we're here to work on, not to shame you, not to strip your authority, but to make sure your fear doesn't end someone else's life, or ruin your own. By the end of the session, a veteran officer approached her. His voice was quiet, grizzled. I thought you were just here to lecture us. And? He glanced around the room, where officers were still gathered in small circles, talking through the drills she'd run. I think you might actually change something. Weeks passed. Then a month, and the changes began to take root. Training curriculum revised. Use of force thresholds reevaluated. Maya's class became mandatory for all new recruits. But more than that, the culture began to shift. Conversations that were once whispered in locker rooms about power, fear, race, restraint were now being spoken openly. Because someone had finally walked into the lion's den. and stood without flinching. Outside the department, Maya's story became a rallying cry. College campuses invited her to speak, activists invited her to collaborate. Even the Department of Justice reached out to consult on their community engagement model, but Maya stayed grounded. Every week, she still taught her self-defense classes. She still swept the mats herself after class. She still walked home through Ashton Park, head high, shoulders steady. Not because she wanted to prove anything, but because she had already proved everything. One night, after a particularly long training session, Hill caught up to her in the hallway of the precinct. "You regret it?" he asked. "Which part?" "Saying yes." Maya looked at him, tired but unwavering. "No, because now, if another woman gets stopped in that park..." She paused. "She might meet an officer who took my class. Your story changed everything." The words came from a young woman, barely 20, standing outside a university auditorium in Atlanta, where Maya Ellis had just finished a keynote titled, "Discipline Over Domination, the New Face of Public Safety." Her voice trembled. "My brother's a rookie. Your training was part of his academy program. He told me he sees people differently now." Maya didn't smile out of pride. She smiled out of hope, because the moment wasn't about her. It was about proof. That one night in Ashton Park hadn't just gone viral, it had gone forward. Months had passed since that confrontation beneath the flickering street lamp. Officer Darren Cole was no longer a cop. His name had become synonymous with abuse of authority. A cautionary tale in policing seminars nationwide. He'd fought the charges, of course, tried to spin the story, claimed misunderstanding, protocol, and eventually, stress. But the footage didn't lie, and neither did the national outcry that followed. Public hearings, DOJ statements, a civil suit that Maya chose not to pursue for damages, but instead leveraged for reform commitments. Every cent the city had offered her in silence money, she redirected into a scholarship fund for women of color pursuing law enforcement careers focused on reform. By the end of the year, Maya Ellis had become more than a symbol. She had become a force. CNN named her one of the 10 most influential voices of the year. Time magazine put her on the cover beside the words, "Calm, trained, unbreakable." But Maya stayed the same dojo, same gym bag, same calm eyes under the city lights. Only now, when she walked through Ashton Park, she wasn't alone. She was joined by students, by community members, by officers who had once viewed her with suspicion, and now, respect. And then it happened. The change she never saw coming, not from a news network or politician, but from within the walls of the same precinct that once tried to silence her. Sergeant Marcus Hill knocked on her door with a sealed envelope in hand. "What's this?" she asked. He hesitated, then smiled. "It's official. The city council just approved it unanimously." Maya opened the document slowly. Ashton Center for Civilian-Led Justice Training, founder and director, Maya Ellis. She looked up, stunned. "It's yours now," Hill said. "Permanent funding, staff, your curriculum, your values. It's not a program anymore, it's an institution." That night, she walked to the park one more time, not out of habit, not out of defiance, but out of reverence, for the moment that had almost taken everything from her. The place where she stood still and said no. No to abuse, no to silence, no to being written off as a threat because of her skin, her strength, or her refusal to bow. She sat on the same bench and listened to the wind in the trees. It was quieter now. Not because the world was fixed, but because one storm had passed and left something stronger in its wake. A few days later, Maya stood in front of a graduating class of police cadets. All of them had completed her course. All of them had studied that night frame by frame, not as a cautionary tale, but as a standard. She looked each of them in the eye as she spoke. "You will wear a badge, you will carry a weapon, but remember this, your most powerful tool is restraint." She paused. "You are not guardians of order, you are servants of peace. And peace begins with how you treat the people who don't look like you, who don't fear you, who stand their ground." They didn't look away. They nodded, because Maya Ellis wasn't just teaching theory, she had lived the test and passed it. One confrontation, one woman, one night beneath a street lamp. That's all it took to remind the world. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just refuses to step back. One baton, one taser, one lie. That's all it took for Officer Darren Cole to try to crush Maya Ellis beneath a system of silence. But she didn't break. She didn't run. She stood firm, not with rage, but with discipline. And in doing so, she didn't just protect herself, she rewrote the rules for everyone else. Remember her name. Because the next time someone thinks calm means weak, Maya Ellis will be the reason they think twice.